Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar regarding ESF compliance. I will shortly hand you over to Richard Baldwin and Andy Simm. Just a couple of things to run through first. If you experience any problems with the audio during the webinar, then please do let us know. And you can do that by entering the question panel on the right-hand side, which is the control panel, and enter your text and we'll catch up with you regarding any problems that you have during the webinar. But you'll be pleased to know we will be recording this webinar, and a link to the webinar broadcast will be sent to all ESF providers via the Intend system, and that will have a YouTube link on there, also with a copy of the slides as well. So no further more, I will pass you over to Richard and Andy.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Richard Baldwin, Head of Compliance and Data here at Ixion. I've got Andy, who's our Audit and Compliance Manager. We're going through the ESF. It's a partner webinar, particularly looking at the form capture application, the FCA, and its benefits and impacts, and also the data that comes out of it. For information, we're just carrying out the first raft of internal compliance started last week. We've already measured the impact of some of the FCA documents on other programs and contracts. Andy has been doing audit and compliance here for 2 years. He's previously been an audit manager at previous companies. If you don't have it, what I would strongly recommend is you refer to the roadmap that's been written that shows all of the compliance guidance. If you send Andy an email after this meeting, we'll be more than happy to share that with you all. Any questions after this, we'll be happy to deal with those at a later date and or through Ian Freestone. So with no further ado, I shall hand across to Andy.
Afternoon, everyone. As Richard and Joe said, my name is Andy Simm. I'm the Compliance Manager for Ixion. Obviously, it's my role to look after the compliance aspects of all the skills funded programs. This is predominantly looking at the ESF contract, but the fundamental principles of the audit approach are obviously applicable to all of our funded contracts. Just up on screen currently, you've got our contact details, so should you have any questions both regarding the content of this webinar and or anything regarding compliance and data going forwards, then please do feel free to contact us at any time, and we will do our utmost to get back to you as soon as possible. So just to kind of go through the agenda items, we have, as Richard just pointed out, we have started a revised audit schedule and process effective 1st of August, in line with the annual skills contract year. There is a risk-based approach to the schedule, so obviously depending on learner volumes and such like, audit activity will be heavily influenced around the actual value of each contract. To clarify, each individual delivery partner will be audited per contract, so it won't necessarily just be a GCGP audit. We will be auditing individual partners on their individual contracts. So if you have 2 contracts with Ixion, then GCGP and SELUP, for example, you will be audited separately on 2 different occasions. For info, the audits are all arranged and carried out centrally here in Chelmsford. Obviously, due to the nature of the digital format of the vast majority of our documentation these days, we can carry them out remotely, which obviously is a more efficient, improved cost-based approach to audit without losing any of the integrity of it. The feedback will be available via your contract manager. Presumably in most instances that will be Ian Freestone. Just to kind of give you a brief overview of the actual audit process, I won't bore you with the ins and outs of it, but all contracts and partners are notified within a month prior to the actual audit. We release a sample to our central admin team here within 5 days of the audit, who then collate all the necessary evidence which has been submitted by yourselves via Intend. The audit, as I've already mentioned, is carried out centrally. A report is written and issued to the operational colleagues, including Ian Freestone, and you will then have 15 to 20 days to collate any evidence or clarifications around supporting evidence to reduce or remove any funding errors that we've identified at the draft stage. There is an appeals process within the audit process should you disagree with any of the findings and such like, but it is hoped that we will start and complete the entire audit journey, if you will, within a calendar month. There is support and training available if you wish, whether that be local or remote. We're more than happy to go through any of the compliance requirements of any of the funded contract, but in the first instance I would point you to the supporting documents that have been issued to all partners via Intend and Ian. The most crucial one, as Richard touched on, is the compliance roadmap, which I'll come on to in a little while. If anyone does have any questions throughout, we'll take them at the end if that's okay. So just to move on to the actual learning agreement, we've taken feedback from both partners and internal operations, and we've learned a little bit more about how the FCA system works ourselves, and as a consequence we've not fundamentally changed the learning agreement, but we've tweaked and improved it for 17-18. You should be aware that everyone is moving over to the online version and systems. So if you are using paper-based versions currently, there will be one of these available to you, but it is expected that this will be used electronically going forwards for all 17-18 delivery partners on ESF. It should look pretty familiar to you on the first page, but just as a quick pointer, whilst you will only have visibility of the ESF learning agreement, a quick reference check is if you can see the ESF logo in the top left hand corner, then you know that you've got the right one. So we've made it pretty clear and easy to see from a visual perspective that you're confident that you're using the correct one. None of the eligibility has changed. I mean, the contract is an ongoing running thing from 16-17 all the way through to 17-18, so there's no fundamental changes that became effective from the 1st of August. It's just that we've actually, as I said, we've just tweaked it slightly based on feedback and kind of streamlined the process. So this all should look pretty familiar to you guys. You've got obviously the qual plan side of things and the non-regulated side. And the employment. One bit that which will obviously commence the learner journey when you actually commence the learner. We've also introduced space for you to plan your progress reviews, and also based on feedback we've put in here the information, advice and guidance. On the FCA, these are all drop-down options, and it basically just says discussed and understood or discussed and further support required, I think is the terminology. If you do feel that there's further support required, then you can record your comments in here, or obviously you can put in your learning that is necessary in the learning activity section just above. Supplementary question, how do you think you will benefit from the training? Pretty self-explanatory, hopefully. And again, we've just updated fundamentally none of the declarations have changed, but obviously with the change from SFA to ESFA, we've obviously just had to change the terminology and little bits and pieces like that. Next visit and signatures, and that's it. So as I said, fundamentally that should all look pretty familiar to you, but obviously it's just been a couple of bits and pieces in terms of tweaks. But you should have seen that when you've gone into your FCA already. But like I say, if anyone does have any questions on that, please feel free to give us a shout. Moving on to the CRM, which is the Customer Relationship Management system within our PICS. We've updated the user guide, which I believe Ian released via Intend on or soon after the 18th of August. Obviously, because we have a number of funded skills contracts, we've now made it generic across all contracts. The ESF delivery are fortunate that all of the examples used within the guide actually refer to ESF, so it should be a lot more familiar and convenient for you as opposed to any of our internal colleagues on any other contracts. But as it says up there, there's no significant changes to the process, but little things in terms of tweaks. For example, you may have noticed that the BKSB website has changed. So obviously the screen dumps in the first user guide referred to the old BKSB website. So just little things like that. And also, again, based on feedback from colleagues and such like, we've tried to improve it, make it more clear and concise. And also the common errors that we find partners and internal colleagues are making, we've tried to emphasize how to avoid those within the text and guidance of the user guide, just so that everyone has seen it. The new one looks like this, which again,
it's got version control on, Andy.
It has got version control, yeah. So if you are unsure as to whether you're referring to the new one, as I said, it was released on the 18th of August. But if you do have any questions or comments, feedback, my email address is there. But also there are contact details for central admin, shared services, data and compliance team, which is ourselves. And also if you require any IT technical support, their phone numbers on there as well. But just kind of whiz through it. It's a blow-by-blow account of how to enter a new applicant within the CRM system. All the way through from an express actually being booked and in PICS, as the title suggests. And there's a couple of brief definitions in terms of what the different status entries are in there. Just kind of quickly whiz through that. But I'd say concept to you that the screen grabs of the BKSB website, for example. Let's see. Okay, it's not going back to the full screen, but never mind. Moving on to the actual FCA. So just so that everyone's clear in terms of the terminology that we're talking about, the CRM system is within PICS, and that is where your sales side of things and the actual transition from the CRM to FCA is there. But the actual FCA is your standalone offline software, and that is fundamentally the system that you use to actually capture the learning agreement and then sync it and update it, upload it, should I say, to Ixion Central Admin. Like the CRM, the user guide has been updated and released on the 18th of August. It's been updated as per the learning agreement that we just went through. It depends on your visibility access, but there are different form types in there. So please do make sure that you're selecting the ESF one if you do have access to any of the other contracts that you work with Ixion on. But as I pointed out before, as long as you can see the ESF logo in the top left-hand corner of each page of the learning agreement, you can't go wrong. Again, minor improvements based on the user feedback and system updates. And as I touched on earlier, the user guide is now generic across all the Ixion contracts. Just to show you that one, very identical in terms of format, but this now looks at the different sides of the FCA, and like I say, you may not see all of these, but if you did, for example, work with Ixion on advanced learning loans, for example, then obviously you would see the advanced learning loan learning agreement next to the ESF one. So it is critical that obviously you select the most appropriate one for the appropriate qualification program. It should look pretty familiar, but all the screen dumps have been updated based on the revised learning agreement. And again, all we've done is just try to emphasize throughout the process, just to avoid any of the common mistakes that we've found other people have done previously. If you want to do it. Yeah. There we go. I'm sure everyone can see it anyway, but hey ho. So just in terms of the few other bits and pieces from the compliance team, there is a compliance roadmap, as we've talked about already. These are ESF contract specific, so there is one for GCGP, there is one for CELEP, and there is one for construction. If any of you deliver on the London construction skills contract, whilst there are two of those which are separate contracts, the roadmap has been bundled together because fundamentally the two contracts, the only real difference is the geographical location, and the roadmap kind of gives you guidance on which contract for which geographical location. We have updated the prior attainment guide, but I mean that's just a supplementary piece of supporting documentation if you want, and is basically a carbon copy of Appendix G of the SFA guidance, which is just on the prior attainment. Again, there was one slight update between 1617 and 1718, so we had to just tweak that slightly, and that was released on the 18th of August. And we've also, as we've previously done, we've have a FAQ for the two systems that we use, and that was updated again on the 18th of August and released then. Just so that you have visibility, and this is what I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about, is this is one of the compliance roadmaps. The front page is basically an overview of what the contract is, and there is a brief quote there that tries to encapsulate what the whole purpose of that contract is. There are links to which documents are being referred to throughout the document. Some of these have obviously changed for 1718. They do periodic updates, as we discovered the other day, to the deliverables evidence requirements, for example. So we've had to update the hyperlinks there. The fundamental principles of funded delivery, just didn't mean to do that. Our contact details at the bottom. And just so that I can kind of give everyone a clear idea as to what the compliance roadmap looks to achieve. Basically, on the left-hand column here, you have the ESF guidance. So this is literally taken from one of the 6 documents that are listed here. So, for example, C115 is from the ESF Funding and Performance Management Rules, and it is point 115 within that document. So it is clear as to where we have got that information from. We're being completely transparent about where the compliance and guidance is coming from. But actually, crucially, what it is hopes to achieve is that it gives you an overview of each of the different elements of the ESF contract and the deliverables therein. In the middle column, it's actually what document you use to achieve whatever's listed here. And then there's further guidance on the far right-hand column in terms of what other supporting documentation that there is available. So this one, the first page is obviously an overview, but to kind of give you a brief example. So for example, SDO1, is taken from that document, which is documentary evidence that the employer has been engaged with the provision of a copy of the company eligibility de minimis form completed. That is taken straight from the contract, which is SDO1 deliverable, and those are the two documents that you need in order to validate that claim. There's also obviously SDO2, which is directly related to SDO1, so there's further guidance on that, and so on and so forth. If you get, for example, non-regulated, then obviously you would have evidence that the learner has started on the agreed program activity. So depending on the format of the documentation that you use, that would either be a progress review or an attendance register, something that demonstrates that that learner has commenced on that program of activity. And then additionally, there's guidance. One of the key questions, one of the more common questions that we get asked a lot is around progression evidence. So if you have any doubts or queries around progression, I would signpost you to this document first. But for example, this is the actual requirements for PGO4. This is the guidance that we expect. And then there's further commentary here. And what we also do as a heads up is that this is the document that we will use to alongside our working papers for each audit, so that we know that everyone has been issued with the roadmap, or if you haven't, please do let us know and I will make sure that you get one straight away. But this is made available so that everyone is clear on what the expectations are in terms of evidence per deliverable per ESF contract. I trust that makes sense. But like I say, if you do have any questions, give me a shout. And that pretty much concludes my section. Just so that everyone is aware, there is a further webinar on this Thursday, which is Thursday the 7th of September, around teaching and learning. A colleague of mine, I believe is it Alison hosting that?
Alison Wattsize, yeah.
Alison Wattsize will be hosting that one. So please do join her for that. I'm not entirely sure as to what the time is, but I'm sure an invite has been sent out for that.
Yeah, 3 till 4.
Right. As it stands, we don't have any questions around the compliance requirements.
A question, Andy.
Oh, fire away, Richard.
I think one of the most common ones we get in is around the mentoring on the SDO2 on GCGP. Is it sufficient just to put on they require it, or should you actually itemise the amount of learning and support around their medium and long-term development that justifies that 15 hours? And if we do put down on the training development plan 15 hours, how is that then followed up?
Well, thank you, Richard. That would be done via the review at the end of the programme. The ONA and the training development plan you would expect to be updated at the end of each learner journey. So there is a space in there to update that in there.
So it's probably a good tool to also get additional learners on different programmes or progressions.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll just allow a few moments for any questions that you may have from any of the content. As I said earlier, we will be sending copies of the slides along with a YouTube broadcast of the webinar for anyone that's not been able to make it today, any colleagues that you may have that you may think may be interested. Now then, we've just got a question coming from Laura, which is, I didn't catch where the new documents FCA and CRM were released to. Was it via email?
I understand Ian released them via Intend. I'm not copied into things on Intend, so if I am wrong on that, then please do let me know, and I will make sure that either myself, Joe, or Ian does release those straight away to you. If it's just a case that yourself, Laura, doesn't have access to Intend, I'd suggest just speaking with your colleague. Oh, you've checked there already. Okay. Then I will follow that up with Ian straight after this webinar. That was the guidance that I was provided prior to this webinar. So no problem. Laura just said thank you. So I will follow that up with Ian immediately after this webinar, and I will get those support guides out to you within the next 24 hours. But if you do have any further questions around the updates or any of the compliance related queries on the ESF contracts, then please do feel to contact me or Richard after this webinar on the email addresses displayed earlier.
Okay, if there's nothing more, it just leaves me to thank both Andy and Richard for today's webinar. And as I said, do get in touch if there are any outstanding questions that you've not been able to ask this afternoon. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.